It's come to my attention that I may have upset or confused some people with my recent social media posts. The next few weeks will be extraordinarily difficult for Jews, Zionists, and allies of Israel, as we all await each week, as if in a macabre kind of Squid Game, to find out which of our precious 94 hostages will be released. It's a tense, anxious time, and we are all holding our breath that all of our hostages will return home safely. But we are only getting to know this information 3 people at a time, and we don't know until the very last minute whether they are healthy, whether they are alive, or whether, unfortunately, they will be returned to Israel in body bags. So every second feels like an hour. And at this time of this delicate ceasefire, last Sunday, there were 2 very distinct reactions between Israelis and Palestinians shown across news networks. In true media fashion, to imply that there is some kind of moral equivalence between Israeli and Palestinian society, networks like CNN aired a split-screen reaction. In one half of the screen, Israelis stood resolute, anxious, tense in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. They were somber, but they stood arm in arm, and they have waited as they did for the last 470 days. And the scene in Rafah was quite different. It seems like there was an unbridled celebration there. There were well-dressed boys and men. They were energetic. They were dancing. They were suddenly a lot of people wearing press vests who appeared. Everyone was recording themselves on what looked like fully charged iPhones. And they all had really good haircuts. It seems like they just stepped out of a barber shop. So what I wanted to know is, they were also declaring victory and pledged allegiance to Hamas. And with their chants of Khyber, Khyber, Ya Yahud, they pledged even more October 7th and slaughters to come. So what I want to know is, where was the genocide? Where was the starvation? And for that same matter, where were the women? No matter, these Palestinians triumphantly declared victory. Into the camera, they said that they could not wait to return to their former life in northern Gaza and Gaza City, before the life they knew before October 7th. But wait a second, wasn't Gaza before October 7th an open-air prison? Wasn't it likened to a concentration camp or a modern-day version of the Warsaw Ghetto? This is why I posted the following meme. As you could see, on the top of the meme, it shows Gaza largely undisturbed with the words open air prison. On the bottom, a destroyed Gaza with the word victory. Now, these are not my words. These are the words of the Palestinians, who for years and years have declared that Gaza is an open air prison. And this lie is also echoed in our college campuses over and over again. And instead of people on college campuses that could have been shouting for Hamas to surrender now, or that hostages should be released now, all we heard was ceasefire now. Well, now is the ceasefire. So memes these days have replaced the old-fashioned political cartoons that appeared in newspapers. Political cartoons and their modern-day counterparts, the meme, are caustic, terse, full of satire, and yes, sometimes darkly visceral. In order to get to the context of this meme, you need to have had previous knowledge of the history of the region and lots of perspective. Now let's get to the victory part of the meme. Somehow, amid the rubble and all the homes that had to be evacuated and destroyed in order for the IDF to eliminate the majority of Hamas's terrorist tunnels, Hamas and their Palestinian supporters are declaring victory. That's the Arab and Middle East mentality for you. They cry victim to get the world's sympathy, and then they cry for a ceasefire, and then Israel relinquishes and offers diplomatic solutions, but unfortunately any diplomatic solutions in the Middle East are regarded as a weakness. In some ways, Hamas has won. They certainly won the sympathy and support of our college students. I've also used a photo in my profile picture that countered the lie that a genocide and a famine were taking place in Gaza. How do I know that this is false? I read. According to a June article in the Israeli newspaper Israel Hayom, Arif Hussein, chief economist at the UN World Food Program, acknowledged there are currently no available figures on the deaths by starvation in Gaza. The allegations of famine have been called into question also by the UN Food Program's Famine Review Committee, which found that previous famine projections were not plausible due to incorrect assumptions, misinterpretation of data, and a significant omission of food entering Gaza through commercial and private sectors. That was an article in June of 2024. In December of 2024, the Times of Israel reported that the Famine Early Warning System Network took down a report it published a day earlier, alleging persistent famine in northern Gaza, after U.S. Ambassador to Israel Jack Lew raised objections over the U.S.-funded agency's methodology. I have been falsely labeled as a racist and Islamophobe, a term which I abhor because it was invented by the Ayatollahs in Iran after the 1979 Islamic Revolution to snuff out any criticism of the spread of radical Islam to the West. As a journalist, I know I'm supposed to be objective, but I'm a Jew first, and I'm a proud Zionist. My opinions are developed from years of covering anti-Israel bias and Jew hatred. So these days I struggle against the bitter ire rising in me as I watched an open display of joy and glee at the promises of another October 7th by a not starving, not genocided group of Palestinian men and boys pledging their allegiance to Hamas. No one in Israel is dancing in victory. My guide was a man named Rabbi Gold. He had lived on the kibbutz for 40 years, where he raised his children and grandchildren there. On the morning of October 7th, he and others on the kibbutz fended off dozens of terrorists before the IDF could get there. Rami said for a few decades, many kibbutzniks, including his sister-in-law, had relationships with people in Gaza. For decades, they provided people in Gaza with food, money, and even trips to doctors in Israel. On the morning of October 7th, the same people who received Israeli compassion and generosity took his sister-in-law from her home and shot her dead. So I question the humanity and the innocence of Gazans when, according to former Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Hamas has recruited a fresh batch of terrorists, as many as the IDF killed, to refresh and rejoin their ranks. Palestinians need to be treated like adults, and they need to take accountability of the destructive culture that they have created. They have brainwashed an entire generation of children to hate Jews and not build up their own country, but to destroy the one and only Jewish state. Last week, I saw a video of a Palestinian woman being released after 5 years in prison for committing a terrorist attack. Her sobbing daughter greets her on camera, throws her arms around her, and says, "Mommy, don't ever go away again. Don't do what you did to make you go away again." And the woman's reply, "Don't worry, I won't. When you're old enough, it will be your turn. I'll send you." So I'll conclude with this, with the words of Golda Meir.